Hey everybody, my name is Steven and welcome back to the Storytime channel. Without wasting any time, let's get into our stories of the day. 2p or not 2p? Back in 2011, I was working for a local council, and as part of the job, we were given an off-site training course. Naturally, this was code for visit a city, get drunk every night, and attend the course. Most of these courses had no exam at the end, just a certificate for attending the course. They put us up at a hotel in the city center on bed and breakfast rates. The expenses policy stated that we were to get a maximum of £10 for lunch and a maximum of $11.73 for an evening meal. No one outside the policymakers know why it was such a strange amount. Supervisors could approve expenses above these values should there be where the maximum is too low. It specifically mentioned a remote hotel with expensive menu, but also mentioned that it was at the discretion of the supervisor. The hotel they booked for me had a restaurant and the cheapest thing on the menu was $11.75, 2 pence more than I was entitled to. I swiped a menu to prove the point. The first day back after the course, and I asked my boss to authorize the extra expense. He looked at it and said no. I explained that not only did it run to 10 pence for the week, 2 pence per day, 5 days, but the cheapest thing on the menu was more than the policy allowed. I even showed him the menu. His response was, stick to what the policy document says you are entitled to. Malicious compliance time. I read the policy document to ensure that I had the details right and found a link to another document entitled Business Overnight and Out-of-Pocket Expenses. This document was additional to the training expenses document, and section 1 of this document stated that it can be used in conjunction with the training expenses policy. I sat down and worked out what I was owed. In addition to the standard meal allowances of £21.73 daily, there was also an extra £28 daily I was entitled to. Also, because I had to travel on a Sunday, I was entitled to travel time as overtime, double pay for a Sunday. As the return train arrived back home after 8 p.m. on the Friday, more than 3 hours past my standard finish time, the Friday was also classed as an overnight. In all, I paid out nearly £110 for meals during the week, but because of my supervisor's reluctance to pay an additional 10 pence, I claimed for around the £300 mark with 7 hours of overtime pay for an extra £182. After explaining it to the head of IT, who wondered why my expenses were so high, he grudgingly signed it off. Note, most of the claimable expenses didn't require a receipt. Internet access, telephone allowance, away from family allowance, and several others were allowances. Cash given if you met a criteria. I had receipts for all my meals, as they needed them. Does anybody else have any experiences with people being as stingy as this boss is being? 10 pence? If you got any stories like that, let me know them in the comment section down below. Absolutely unbendable travel rules? Fine by me. I worked for a company that was bought out by a large multinational corporation. After a couple of years, a new online expenses system was put in place. This also was used to book travels, hotels, etc. And we were told that under no circumstances could it be circumvented. The travel section was strange. The way it worked was you chose the city you were traveling to, and it gave you the pre-approved hotel you had to choose. All very straightforward, until you consider how these hotels got on there. It wasn't through hundreds of corporate negotiations. It was when the first traveler using the system had to stay in that city, found a hotel that met their needs, that became the default hotel. I live in a small country and the local company was based about 150 kilometers from the capital. The only people who'd used that system to stay in my country were the senior VPs who'd worked on the takeover, and when they returned to the capital to fly home, usually spent a few vacation days there. I was asked to go on a training course run by a company in the capital, and being a lowly parole would have expected a Travelodge or similar, but the only choice available to me was the 5-star Intercontinental Hotel, where breakfast starts at €50 and the rooms are eye-watering. I checked with a scheme admin, and she laughed as she read me the rules. Under no circumstances could the system be circumvented. The course was over 2 weeks, and at month end my expenses were submitted. Nearly $6,000 in hotel bills, plus food and mileage. My boss, in a different country, was almost in tears when he called me about this because he knew this compliance to the rules meant he'd have to explain this to his boss. Oddly enough, some other hotels were added soon after. You can't blame OP on this one. They even went and checked in with the scheme admin who said that they can't circumvent it. So I would have ran with it as long as I could and see how far I could get with it. Mandatory drug test. Back in 2012, I worked as a medic for the largest medic service in Louisiana as a remote paramedic on a drilling rig. I live in Panama City Beach, Florida. I was hired on in 2007 and was chosen at random several times a year for a drug test. Every time I was chosen, I was either at work or on training, so it was not a big deal. Enter 2012. I had just returned home on the Thursday before Memorial Day from a 2-week stint on the rig in the Gulf of Mexico. I got a phone call around 4 p.m. on Friday saying I had 24 hours to complete a drug test. I was by the pool and a 6-pack in when I got the call. I asked where I needed to go to pee in a cup. My options were Jacksonville, Atlanta, or New Orleans. There were no other authorized places to accept my exceptional urine, and I had 24 hours. I called up a few friends and they decided New Orleans would be the best spot to spend Memorial Day. To follow all the compliance, we left Panama City Beach, drove to NOLA, partied all night, booked the only hotel we could find, eat at really expensive restaurants, peed in a cup, then went back to the French Quarter. Stayed one more night and drove home on Sunday. I turned in my expense report as follows. 400 miles travel expense one way, $220. One meal in NOLA for Friday night, $50. $50 was the most we were allowed per meal. One night in the French Quarter, $299. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner, $150. One night in French Quarter, $349. Breakfast, $50. 400 miles home, $220. Lunch, $50. 16 hours billed as overtime at $40 per hour, $640. Total billed, $1,948. My supervisor probably shot himself, but I got paid. And now there are more authorized places to pee in a cup. And until my departure from them in 2014, I was never selected again for a random test. I'm honestly so surprised that they managed to get away with that. $2,000 to have a nice trip in NOLA? Sounds like a good time to me. Delete everything? Okay. At the start of secondary school, each student at my school was given a unique computer login where we can access communal resources and save our own private work. A few of my files seemed to keep disappearing and new things were put there that I didn't create. After a few days, I figure out I'm actually sharing my account with another student, hence the mysterious missing files and random new ones. We meet up and learned we have the same surname, first initial, and tutor group. So we assume that's why our accounts are actually the same one. We go down to the IT teacher. We've just started here, so figure this is a good place to start. He insists it is impossible for us to have the same account and that we should go in and delete everything that isn't our own work. We explain the situation, even offering to demonstrate how if one of us makes a new document, it will appear in the other's account. This was fruitless, so we are instructed to sit down and delete everything that isn't ours. We do so, log off, log on again, and we both have completely blank accounts, having just deleted everything between us. No backup for students' private work. We've lost all assignments and homework. The teacher leaves us, presumably to figure out what's happening, comes back 15 minutes later with an apology and a note excusing us from all homework already set and for not having our classwork. The next week we receive new accounts and a month later, the IT systems are out for a few days. Possibly unrelated, but we like to think they were improving the system to stop this happening again. As a bonus, the notes were undated and signed by the head teacher, so I used it a few times in emergencies over the years. That last tidbit is pretty smart. I can imagine OP finding a place to carefully store it so it looks like it doesn't age a single day, so that they can pull it out and say like, oh, the headmaster excused me because of this. Okay, I'll only wear the provided uniform. So my local government workplace decided to introduce a strict uniform a few years ago. We always had a dress code, no jeans, no shorts, no exposed midriff, and if you didn't comply with it, words would be had. So most people were sensible and dressed for work accordingly. But sadly, according to management, that needed to change. The uniform chosen was awful. Black skirt or trousers of your own, fine so far. White blouse and jazzy neck scarf for ladies. White shirt and jazzy tie for gentlemen. These were provided for us. Staff had to wear the scarf or tie despite it being a strangle risk. We work with the public who are sometimes confrontational, and even our lanyards had to be the special breakaway type in case we were attacked. Suddenly, that risk was forgotten/ignored. Not to mention unnecessary gendering of the uniform. I asked for a tie and was refused. Enter the malicious compliance. We did not plan or coordinate this, but somehow everyone in every satellite office came to the same conclusion. We will wear the uniform you provide. We will only wear the uniform you provide. Now, being a local government, the budget was pretty non-existent, so the quality of the shirts was awful. Paper thin, see-through and cheap, badly sized, people having to request several sizes bigger than they wear from the regular shops in order for them to fit. Full-time staff, who almost always worked 5 days per week, were allocated 2 shirts. Part-time staff were allowed 1 shirt no matter how many days their shifts were spread over. Now, either one of 2 things will happen here. Either the shirts will become very grubby after a day of work, and you turn up the next day in a grubby shirt which looks very unprofessional, or you wash it after every shift, in which case it'll become worn, frayed, and even more thin and see-through after a few months, which looks very unprofessional, and will need replacing after a few months, which there was no budget for. After a very scruffy looking year and several requests from the 80 or so staff for new shirts, the rules were relaxed somewhat so that staff can wear any plain white, black, or monochrome clothes that they wish. And suddenly, everyone looks much nicer, more professional, and coordinated. I've always been a big hater of overly restrictive dress codes, and I hate the provided stuff because it's always so streamlined and so cheap, and the sizes are so incorrect, and oftentimes they want to charge you for it and it's a huge markup. You should not belittle people trying to help you. Disclaimer, I am a certified electrician as I took several courses during school. Still, I didn't end up working with electricity and it's been a long time since I did any work, but this pandemic is making it hard to get a guy come and make quick fixes. This is in Mexico and the heat is making life miserable for some of us. That's why my ex-wife bought a new air conditioner and asked me to move her old unit to another bedroom to replace an even older unit. No big deal, so I comply, and when I see the outlet, I inform her that the voltage is different, 220 volt, and that her unit is 110 volt. She then starts literally screaming that she knows her house better than I do, and if I am not capable of doing things, I should not volunteer to do them. A couple days pass since I refused to replace the outlet with a regular one. The 220 volt is a different shape. So she keeps pestering me because I don't know crap about electrical work and I am a bad person because I don't care about my family suffering from the heat. I know my daughter's bedroom has a split unit and the little one sleeps with her sister. The bedroom I made the switch to is occupied by his brother and he was out of the city until yesterday. So I told her the risks and that it would freak up the unit. She insisted and kept saying that I knew nothing about anything. So I replaced the outlet and let her plug the unit into it. I wish I had recorded her face when the AC worked for about 10 seconds and then stopped. I gladly checked the outlet to let her see that it was perfectly connected. She then plugged in a fan to prove it wasn't connected. I wish I could broadcast a mental image of her face when the fan sparked and started smoking before she hurried to plug it off. Yesterday, an AC technician was brought to check the unit and diagnosed it as dead. Then she was still arguing that the outlet had 110 volt. The technician then plugs in his multimeter and in the most smug tone available declares, "No ma'am, this is a 220 volt outlet." It feels so good. The brother bought a second-hand split unit, paid to get it installed, filled with gas and serviced. Also scolded her for talking out of her butt. He also tried to pay me for my work, but I refused. This feels so good that I feel paid in full. If somebody's gone to school at least to some degree for something and I assume the person making the claims hasn't, maybe they should consider putting a little bit of merit into what they're trying to explain to you. But with that being said, that's all the stories we have for today, so what I want to know is, which of these stories was your personal favorite and why? Let me know in the comment section down below. And thank you all so very much for watching and listening to the Storytime channel today. If you haven't yet, please consider subscribing and don't forget to turn notifications on so you'll never miss an upcoming video. Thank you all again for watching and listening to the Storytime channel.